Hey everyone, Curse Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted, and here we have a second draft of Kybor's Tom Bombadil Sagas deck. Thank you so much, Kybor, for once again supporting the channel, and I'm very excited to see this new draft. Kybor has sent us a little bit of questions for us to go through. They say this is the second draft for the Tom Bombadil deck. They're overall very happy with the additions that we suggested, and now they're looking for some meta suggestions. They find the biggest problem I'm running into with this deck is Tom Bombadil is getting killed before I can get enough sagas to generate enough lower counters to give him indestructible and hexproof. So with that in mind, Kybor is looking for early game protection. They were thinking of feigned death effects, but we're in all 5 colors, so we have more options. So I've got a few of those set up. They were also saying that a lot of the removal in their play group is playcrafter effects, so sacrifice effects, so that even with a lot of the regular kind of protection, it won't protect through that, board wipes, and targeted removal. So we're going to try to find what cards can solve the most amount of these problems. Then they want us to look at the sideboard for looking at a few cards that look good to add, especially sagas coming in Wild of Eldraine and the Doctor Who expansions. And then, of course, looking through the sagas, seeing any that need to be cut. I'm very, very good at cutting people's precious darlings, so don't you worry at all about that. So those are the 3 things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about dealing with Tom Bombadil and his vulnerability in metas, both how to play around it and how to fix it with cards. We're going to look to add a few cards, and we're going to look to take out a few cards. Now, I do want to say I've received quite a few Tom Bombadil decks. I think that's pretty normal. He seems like a really fun commander, he's a really fun character, and obviously with sagas being as popular as they are, a 5-color saga commander is really, really attractive. Unfortunately, I won't be able to make it to every single one of these Tom Bombadil decks, and a lot of them have a lot of very similar elements. So I'm hoping this second draft I can kind of point out some ideas I have for Tom Bombadil, and hopefully that will help people whose decks don't immediately make it through. As always, this deck list is in the video description below, and I highly recommend you go and take a look at the deck. This is a second draft, and Kybor has made quite a bit of adjustments and improvements to it, so I think it's already at a really strong place and can be really helpful if you are looking to build your own Tom Bombadil deck, or if you're looking to give ideas on this Tom Bombadil deck and you want to have specific criticisms or suggestions to make. And as always, while you are in that section in the video description, you'll find the link to the form where you can submit your own decks to me that I can go and take a look at. And if you, like Kybor, want to support the channel and bring your deck to the front of the queue, there is a link for that too. All right. So, who is Tom Bombadil, and why are we using them in our 5-color commander deck? Well, I think this is a commander we all are very familiar with, but as always, I'll read it out. This is a 5-color, 5-mana, 1 of each color, 4/4 God Bard. He's got 2 main abilities. The first one says, if you have 4 or more lore counters among sagas you control, Tom Bombadil has hexproof and indestructible. And our second ability is, when the final chapter ability of a saga you control resolves, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a saga card. Put that card onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. This ability triggers only once each turn. So Tom Bombadil gains protection when you have enough lore counters among all your permanents, but the main goal is that when he is out and one of your sagas finishes, you cascade into the next saga and play it for free. This is a form of card advantage, card selection, where you can just keep the torrential downpour of sagas going and keep the train running. So let's talk about, even without looking at the deck, let's take a moment to talk about Tom Bombadil in terms of vulnerability. Kybor is finding that Tom Bombadil is being taken off of the board very, very often, and that is making the deck harder to play. This is frankly unsurprising, because if you sat down across from me, this is the exact strategy I would use against you. See, there are a lot of different commanders that we play, and there are commanders that, will take a strong strategy, make it stronger. There is a commander that will take a mid-range approach and just be generally good. There are commanders that are combo pieces within their deck. But then there are commanders that are a little bit like the opposite of the first one, where Tom Bombadil is here to make a weaker deck stronger. Sagas aren't exactly the strongest cards in the game. Though there are some sagas that are very, very powerful, the majority of them are just kind of okay. And the way we improve them is by using Tom Bombadil, which makes them a lot stronger and allows us to gain advantage of more triggers and more things that interact with our sagas as more sagas are played. This is pretty good. However, there is a bit of a problem here. The problem is that this makes it easy to pressure the deck by pressuring Tom. Once Tom is off the battlefield, all of your sagas get just a little bit worse, and the deck gets a little clunkier. Because now you don't get the free cascade, you don't get the free ability, and you don't get to do a little extra shenanigans as proliferating a saga on an opponent's turn, to get another trigger. So it makes sense that your opponents will pressure Tom, because as long as they pressure Tom, your deck will kind of do things, but not at a very quick pace and not at a unpredictable pace, right? Every time we play a saga, your opponent has complete information of what's going to happen, right? When they play Binding of the Old Gods, they know that on the first one, when it's played, it's going to destroy an online permanent, and on the second one, it's going to get you a forest, and on the third one, usually nothing will happen. So they know how to play around it. Likewise, when Kiora, my goodness, I've messed up I've forgotten how to say her name. Kiora Best the Sea God. Yeah, that 8/8 is really strong and dangerous when it comes into play, but your opponents have 2 turns to play around the subsequent effects. Now, of course, the trade-off is that you don't pay mana for these subsequent effects, so generally, sagas have a bit of variance to them, but the good ones are really good, and the bad ones are just kind of okay. They're kind of like Planeswalkers. If you remember recently, I had which was it? A 3-color Planeswalker deck. Luri, I think? Lutri? Luris? No, Luris is the cat. It doesn't matter. And part of the way we looked at those commanders was to... Liori, that's what it was. Got it. The part of the way we looked at those commanders was how they interacted with each other and interacted with the board. And oftentimes we were looking for a single ability on them that we really, really liked. This is very similar to how we play with sagas, right? We're going to look through here and we're going to find on each saga, there's at least one ability we really, really like, right? With Furia's Retribution, we're really happy about the 4/4 Angel Warrior. Everything else is kind of okay. When we have the first Ironian Games, we're generally happy about the 1/1 and maybe the gold token at the end. The card draw is kind of neat. Actually, this one's really good. This is a bad example. I'm going to go the, is it Juggend? Yeah, Juggend defends the temple. This is a better example, where really we're using this card for its first ability to give us a mana dork, and the +1/+1 counters are just okay. This card also transforms, which is kind of nice. But that to say, when we're looking at these cards, this is kind of the analysis we need to break down. And when we look at these and then we look at Tom, I think the whole idea starts kind of coming together. That for a lot of them, once the really good chapter of the saga has resolved, the rest of the saga is generally just okay. And during that time, your opponents don't need to worry too much about it. They'll need to worry about it if Tom Bombadil comes out and gets another saga off of it, but if they can stop that, they're in a good place. Okay, so all of this to say, Tom Bombadil, if you're playing this deck, people are going to target your commander. That's just a fact. There's just commanders that are like this, and it's just how it is. And that's okay. So how are we going to deal with this? Well, there's two directions. One, I have a set of cards that I want to show and look at that we can consider to kind of help give a little bit of defense. I think there's probably going to be like 5 cards. I don't want to put too many in them, but we'll be looking at those in a second. But first, I want to discuss the situation of casting Tom Bombadil. And what Kybor says was there's a lot of situations they find where they just don't have the right setup, or they can't get enough sagas down in a row to get Tom Bombadil's first ability going, where you need to have 4 or more lore counters. Now this kind of makes sense, because when we're using these lore counters, we have to remember that, sorry, I'm trying to find a way to word this, that once they hit 2, they're usually going to go off. So most of the time most of these go to 3. Not all of them, but most of them will go to 3. And when we think of it that way, and we think of that each saga gives the most amount of counters to Tom at 2, the turn before it goes off, we realize we're in kind of a tricky situation. It's kind of hard to find the turn to play Tom and then, have another saga come out and make it indestructible and hexproof. I think it's just much smarter and much more worthwhile to play with the idea that you are not playing Tom until you have the 4 counters already. You should not be rushing this commander out. Now, there's situations where you can't do that, or your opponent responds by destroying one of your sagas, making Tom vulnerable again. But in those kind of situations, you can only do so much to play around it, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. I would just try to set up so the number of lore counters when Tom comes down is 4. And the ideal situation is that it's still 4 the turn after. If he comes back to you and one saga starts resolving, like the final chapter is being completed, remember that another saga is coming in and another 1 or 2 sagas have been gaining a chapter. So ideally, if you have it set up that 1 saga's on 2 and 2 sagas are on 1 and you play Tom, you can set it up that next turn you still have 4 when the first one resolves. But you might say, well, Cursed, hold on, for sagas to have a counter on 1, they need to have been played the same turn. Are you suggesting that we play 2 sagas and then we play Tom? I never said it would be easy. This is a really tricky thing to set up. Most likely the best situation is to have 2 sagas on 2 counters and then you play Tom. That's still hard because you probably want to play 2 sagas the turn before. I never said it was going to be easy. If you want to guarantee that Tom can't be immediately taken off the field, it's going to be tricky. And I don't know if 1 Tom Bombadil trigger is enough for the deck to really get an advantage off of it. So I guess all I'm trying to say is that it's tricky to keep Tom alive. You should try to play around it as much as you can so he comes in indestructible and hexproof. But if it's impossible, don't worry about it. If you play him the first time and he gets removed, that's okay. You did your best. You tried to play him at the right time and it didn't work out. But if you're playing him the second time, you really need to make sure that he comes down with indestructible and hexproof. Because 7 mana is a lot of mana for this effect. It's almost not that good anymore. And with that in mind, I think I would definitely make sure he comes out like that and you can keep him at indestructible or hexproof. This is a very difficult deck to play. There's so many things in the air, and Tom kind of represents that himself. Okay, so what are the protection spells we can use to kind of accentuate this gameplay? If we look in Kyber's deck, right now the instants that protect him are Counterspell, Heroic Intervention, Mana Drain, Fierce Guardianship, Teferi's Protection. This is our main protection right now. Now there's a few other cards that I can suggest. In fact, one just came to mind. Let's say, there we go, I'll just put that in 2. But we're going to look at two kinds of, that's actually two different cards, interesting. We're going to look at two kinds of protection. One is reactive, one is proactive. Let's talk about the reactive first. When I say reactive, I'm specifically saying the cards that have to be played after Tom. So, first one's nice and easy. Talking about, before we get into Feign Death effects, Kaya's Ghost Form for 1 black is an aura that you enchant our commander with, and as long as our commander is enchanted with this one, he's really, really hard to deal with. If he is removed from play, like exile, he'll come back. If he's destroyed, he'll come back. If he's bounced, unfortunately he won't come back, but he'll still only cost 5 with no commander tax, so we'll have to take it. If he is shuffled in the deck, unfortunately, he does have to go to command zone, but also because it came up, if he is sacrificed, this will still trigger. So this is a really nice, almost universal protection spell. The next one, obviously, is the Feign Death effects. And here I'm showing Not Dead After All, which in Commander, I would argue, is probably the strongest one, because it represents 3 damage when the enchantment is removed. Yes, when this aura is put in the graveyard. So when this aura falls off or goes into the graveyard, it'll do 3 damage, which is really good. It also has sick art and a sick name, so this is my new favorite one. So with that in mind, immediately I have to say that this is good, but requires you to hold up mana. And it only interacts with kill spells and no other form of removal. So this is good, but it has limitations. We could play Dispel or any other counterspell, but what I like more is Slip Out the Back. Slip Out the Back will also protect our commander from board clears, because it'll phase out until your next turn. But the thing is, when you think about it, Tom really has no business on the board until your next turn, right? He doesn't really add to your board. He doesn't really do anything when you're not ticking up your sagas. So having him gone for the entire turn cycle honestly isn't that bad. When this happens, you're kind of fine with it and you're ready to just move on. And when he phases back in, you have all your mana again and probably a saga is about to go off. So this is probably the one I like the most of a universal protection. And I like it so much that I'm offering a second version of this card that's worse, which is March of Swirling Mist. March of Swirling Mist lets you exile cost blue cards to pay 2 towards X, and this says up to X target creatures face out. This one's pretty cool because you can just exile a blue card and it still costs 1, or you can pay just the regular 2 for it to phase out your commander. However, this also has a much higher, what should I call this, proactive use, where you can phase out someone's entire board on their turn and they have to wait an entire turn cycle to get it back, making them, either fogging their attack or making them vulnerable to an attack from you. So this one, and the last one I'm going to say in this section, is kind of a mix of proactive and reactive. You can play it proactively, but you have to reactively equip it. And this is Robe of Stars. Robe of Stars gives a permanent phase out mana ability to our commander. And it also obviously phases out the Robe of Stars, which protects the robe as well. It also gives a little health, which is still, it's still relevant, but it does require quite a bit of mana to work the turn Tom is played, because it's 5 at least to cast Tom, 1 to equip, and then you have to hold up a 1 and a white to use the ability. That's just a lot to hold up. However, once you untap and you have this out, it becomes a lot better. So you can proactively put this card out, but when it comes to equipping and activating, it is reactive. All right, let's look at some options that are proactive. These are cards you can play before playing Tom, and that kind of make it easier to keep Tom around. Siren Stormtamer is a defensive card that you can pay 1 blue, sacrifice it to counter a spell or ability that targets you or a creature you control, that creature being Tom. You still have to hold up mana for this one, but it does stop spells and abilities that could hit from a variety of different ways, so I think it's a pretty strong one and worth considering. Unfortunately, it's just a bad card otherwise. In fact, a lot of these are just kind of bad outside of protecting Tom, but we know that, that's why we're putting in. Likewise, we have Selfless Savior, who can be sacrificed to give a creature indestructible. And this doesn't have a mana cost to use the ability, but it only gives indestructible. So it is a bit of a give and a take, because exile effects and the like will see around this. Also, sacrifice effects will also see around this. However, if someone plays Plaguecrafter and you have Selfless Savior and your commander out, well, you just sacrifice the Savior to the sack effect, and it has the same effect, so pretty good. Then we have Selfless Spirit, which does a similar thing, but it does give indestructibility to your entire board, which makes it a bit stronger, and it has evasion, which means you can attack with it, take out opposing planeswalkers, and the like. I think this one is definitely stronger, and I would play this one first. And this is a card that used to be definitely a few bucks. This is a very cheap card now. It's been reprinted quite a bit. It's a very strong card, and I really do recommend picking them up. The last one is an interesting one. I would recommend this probably last, but No Rest for the Wicked is 1 and a black. It's an enchantment, so it's harder to deal with. And what it does is when you sacrifice this card, all your creatures that went to the graveyard that turn are returned to your hand. This is minimal play in this kind of deck. There's not a lot of uses for it, but I thought I wanted to mention it anyways, because like Selfless Spirit, you can proactively put it onto the battlefield. And like Selfless Spirit, it protects from a number of things, though this one will stop sacrifice effects as well, though you will have to recast your commander. The fact that it's an enchantment and you can't Doomblade it is nice, but it's kind of close. These are the cards I'd play. I think I would really play Slip Out the Back, Kaya's Ghost Form, and then maybe Selfless Spirit as my primary ones, and then I'd look at the others depending on what I think is appropriate. The phase outs are pretty good. Robe of Stars might actually beat out Selfless Spirit, but I think they're interesting ways to protect your commander. But you have to remember, at a certain point, your commander is going to die, and there's nothing you can do to protect him. It's just the game of Magic. And you should find ways to play this deck without being so reliant on Tom. Because if this deck doesn't work without Tom, then this deck probably has a pretty big weakness. Alternatively, you could just accept the fact that when Tom dies, the deck falls apart. That's perfectly fine. I think a deck I was talking about a while back, I think it was the Ashnod deck, I was talking about how certain decks just fold to kind of interaction. Like a 5-color dragon deck folds to Blood Moon. A graveyard deck folds to Rest in Peace. And I don't think there's any shame in that. It is a card that just beats your deck and you just go, okay, that's it, I'm out of the game. And that's fine. And if 3 players are spending all of their mana constantly to defeat Tom Bombadil, there's only so much you can do, right? At a certain point, you're probably going to lose the game if they keep that pressure up. And if they can't, well, you're probably going to win if they're spending all of their resources like that. Additionally, you have cards like Rhystic Study that benefit from this kind of foolishness of players just constantly trying to get through at you. And with that in mind, you can get ahead in other ways and still win. You know, there's another card like Rhystic Study called Esper Sentinel. Yes, we are here to look at additions and subtractions from the list in general. Let's look at the cards I don't really like in the deck first, and then we'll go into the cards to add. So, Jetmir Nexus of Revels is a very strange inclusion to me. I understand that a lot of the good sagas create tokens, and Jetmir plays well with tokens. I don't know how useful this is. Jetmir works in a dedicated token deck. The amount of tokens you need for this to be useful is quite a few. That first +0 and Vigilance is not that hard to get. But the Trample as 6 tokens, 6 creatures, that's starting to get difficult. And that last one of 9, I just don't see it happening. Your opponents are going to be interacting with you, and if Jetmir gets out of control, they'll just target Jetmir instead of the tokens. So Jetmir stands out as being kind of weak here. I guess the question is, would you play pay for a 3-color, 4-mana, 5/4 that gives all your creatures +0 and vigilance. +1/+0 and vigilance. And the answer is in Commander, probably not, right? And if you look at it that way, I just don't think Jetmir is going to make the cut here. Looking at sagas, I like the majority of these sagas. The ones that don't create creatures have utility to them, and the rest of them generally create creatures that I like. But there's one card here that I can't seem to escape these days, and that, of course, is There and Back again. Please, people, why do you like this card? I just don't understand it. It has a okay ability to start with, and then a pretty bad one, because paying 5 mana in 2 turns to get a mountain is not great, even if it's untapped. And then the final thing is just a 6/6 with flying that has it has haste. I wonder how often I assumed it didn't have haste. Even with haste, I still don't like this card. A 6/6 haste that when it dies, you make a bunch of money. I don't like this. I don't think it progresses your game plan. Even with token synergies, I don't think it makes enough of a body. It takes so long for it to go off. It's at least like turn 6 or higher for this to happen. I don't know. I just really, really don't like it. I don't know how happy you are to cascade into this card. This is gonna haunt me forever. It's gonna be in every deck from now on. Let's look at the other ones. A lot of the other sagas I do generally like. I remember a few of them that I found. I just want to see. Looking at the Elder Dragon War, like this is my comparison. This has 3 really good abilities at 4 mana, and yeah, it just makes a 4/4 without haste. But my goodness, such a better card. All right, a Cronin War feels a little. This one feels weird. This is really, really close. The fact that you steal a creature is interesting, but the fact that you gotta give it back and you don't have a lot of sack outlets, I don't like as much. So this one's close to being particularly weak. And I think that's it. The rest of them almost universally. Okay, I guess Trickster God's Heist. If you really enjoy this ability, I get why it's in here, but I don't really enjoy this ability, so I would cut this as well. There's going to be some situations where you're going to feel really, really good, especially if you can give someone the Trickster God's Heist for like their Smothering Tithe or something. But even then, I mean, like, is this really what you want to do? Like, I just don't think it's really good. Like, rest in peace, Tybalt, but this isn't the Tybalt card that you really want in a deck like this. I would probably cut this as well. All right, so those are generally my cuts. I think the rest is really good. Mana Drain has a lot of playability because a lot of our cards have a single pip, so I'm not too hard on it here. Oh, Second Harvest was the other one. Second Harvest feels weird. I watched a video a few weeks ago about someone referring specifically to Second Harvest as a very much so win more card. And I want to make a video of what win more means, but I'm inclined to agree. Second Harvest is only good in this deck when you are ahead. What does it mean for this deck to be ahead? Well, you've been playing sagas, resolving your abilities, and keeping those creatures around. You might say, but I'm going to say it's actually a little more than that, because Second Harvest isn't good after you've cast Battle for Brenegard, where you get, 2 elves, then you get 2 more, so you get 4 creatures from this. Let's say it's the only creature token enabler, and then you cast Second Harvest and you get 4 1/1s. That's not good enough, right? Let's say you don't have the Battle for Brenegard and you've just played First Ionian Games and Jugun Defends the Temple. Are you really going to use Season Harvest or a Second Harvest on these cards? Probably not, right? So Second Harvest not only needs you to be resolving and playing your token producing sagas, but you also need quite a few of them. If you aren't getting at least like 6 tokens, I don't think it's worth 4 mana. So all in all, this card feels like it's only good when you're very much ahead. And if you have 6 tokens and your opponents aren't getting ready to board clear you, which would invalidate Second Harvest, well, I mean, like, you're already winning, right? Do you really need Second Harvest? Whereas instead you could be holding up mana for like mana drain. I guess you could always hold up mana, but you know, use your mana proactively by casting out enchantments or other sagas, right? I just don't think Second Harvest is where it's at. All right, those are the main ones. The rest of the deck continues to look really good. This is the second draft, so I do have a high expectation of the deck doing really well. I will note, looking back at this, I am interested to see if there's any reason to look at more mana generating creatures, but I think we already have a good number. I guess I was just looking at the 1 mana ones and feeling we could play a few more, but I do think this is fine. Is there another? I guess we could play like Gilded Goose or something, but even then, I don't know. You could play both the Hierarchs because they tap for half your mana each, but I don't know. I'm unsure on the exact numbers because the creatures in this deck, like the more creatures you put in, the more something like Jetmir gets better. The more something like creature boosting sagas get better. But then it also opens you up to board clears, so I'm unsure. Selfless Spirit does also, I will say, get better with more creatures, so I'll leave it up to you. If you feel like you need to power out your 3 mana cards faster, a few more 1 mana creatures is going to be very, very functional. Though you're playing Utopia Sprawl and Wild Growth, I think maybe it's just fine. Maybe the number's just fine and I'm just having a hard time just wrapping my head around it. All right, let's look at the sideboard and the cards that I would suggest. So we can go through all of them. There's only some that I'm going to suggest, but it shouldn't be too long. Esper Sentinel is just fantastic in a deck like this. You need the card draw, you need the early pressure, you need something your opponents to target instead of your commander. You should play Esper Sentinel. Black Market Connections is fine here. I don't know how much you can play around the life loss. It will really add up because once Bombadil is off the board, the ability to pressure you is actually really, really easy because though you make tokens, you don't make meaningful defense, and sometimes it takes a while for those tokens to come out. And a lot of your creatures, like your Mana Dorks, your Weaver of Harmony, and like Eidolon of Blossoms, aren't things you want to block with. So bigger creatures, a lot of creatures, they're very strong at taking you out. So Black Market Connections does have the risk of you burning out of your life really easily. That being said, it does generate tokens, which is on theme for this deck, and so it kind of works like a weird saga that it does 3 different things and you're going to use them in turn. So I leave it up to you. I think it's a really good card, but I would have a backup plan for life gain because once this comes out, you are very, very easy to start burning out. City of Death. This is a hard one to really figure out. This could be really, really good, and this could be just fine. If this is played and your opponent like wastes a spell to destroy your treasure token prior to the second ability coming off, it's possible, depending on your hand, that it just does nothing for the rest of its, like for a few of its chapters. And that's kind of hard to kind of figure out. I think this is worth testing, but it's just going to be really, really difficult to kind of judge how good it is until it goes through a lot of games. That's just how it's going to be, unfortunately. SWAT is good. If you have SWAT, play SWAT. It is definitely the best kind of protect your commander card, but it is an expensive card. And so I try not to suggest the 0 mana counterspells or the 0 mana interaction when I'm suggesting cards. But if you have it, it is better than the rest of them because the only time you want to protect Tom is when he's on the field. So this is free, so I do get that. Don't like this because it doesn't create tokens. I think it feels cool and can do some cool things for you, but generally you're just going to be happier when your deck works as intended. Likewise, Huntsman's Redemption has a really good 1, and the rest are just okay. I don't think you want the ramp. You don't want to sacrifice a creature because you're already kind of susceptible to that. And the third phase is just, it's not an overrun, it's just 2 creatures. So this just kind of reads as 3 mana, get a 3/3, and I don't think that's where you want to be. There's definitely better token producers in your deck, so I don't particularly love it. 3 Blind Mice, I think, perfectly fits into here. It feels like a second copy of Battle for Bredegard, and I really do like that. At worst, you know what? As I say that, I do like City of Death a lot more. I'm realizing if I like 3 Blind Mice, I should like City of Death. So there you go. There's my answer. Yeah, 3 Blind Mice is great. I guess I prefer having the first creature token versus the first treasure token, which is why I like this better. But just play City of Death second, I guess, and you'll be fine. So this is really nice. Historian's Boon. Get a 1/1, get a 4/4. I think this is fine. I think this works very much so on theme, so I am inclined to tell you to test it out. I think it's going to be tricky to see how good this is. Okay, you know what I like about these cards? I like that they don't require Tom Bombadil to. That's why I like this card. This works as a kind of way Bombadil works, and so you have some redundancy and some safety nets when Bombadil's not on the field. So play this for show. Oath of the Grey Host. This one's hard because it does have a really good third saga, but it is the third saga. Getting a food token, it is a token, so you'd be pretty happy about that. Getting a treasure token, okay, this seems fine. It seems a lot of work because you don't get the creatures till the end, and even then they come in tapped. So I don't love it, but it's definitely playable in a deck like this, so I would consider it. Rite of Belzenlock is good, but I don't think it belongs here. The idea with creating the 4/0/1s is you want to be an aristocrats or sacrifice deck where you can make the most of that many tokens. And then when you get the 6/6, you want to be able to sacrifice your other creatures for it. But your deck kind of has a problem that you can easily be pressured out of that. As mentioned before, you're going up against board clears and sacrifices. So after chapter 2, if your opponent's board clear and just let this card resolve, you're taking 6 to the face. I guess you're taking 6 to the face on the next turn, actually, which is kind of interesting. Maybe I've kind of under-evaluated this card, but even then, I still don't think it's that good. I don't think you're the kind of deck that wants a 6/6. It's not about having one big 6/6, as you heard me talk about there and back at the end. You want to go wide. And with that in mind, I just don't think this makes it. This is non-tokens, so I get that this allows us to get extra copies of Tom Bombadil, but that's actually not how it works because you're going to lose them all by the time the last one goes off. So I'm just going to say no to this. This isn't what the kind of deck wants to do, so we'll skip that. Likewise, 11th Hour feels a little strange. You don't have doctors, nor should you. And so all of the abilities feel kind of disjointed. And getting a copy of a creature with, that it's a different legendary name is okay, but I think you'd be happier just using a different, clone effect for that. All right, Song of Arundel creates treasures. This is fine. I don't like the last ability. Oh, it's each creature. Okay, yeah, this is fine. This is perfectly playable. I think this is great. It gives you evasion for your team, and I like that it draws 2, draws 2. I think you should play this if you can make it fit. Cruelty of Gix, I like a little less. It's just this is for a more control deck, and you're kind of proactive with your tokens. So though I really like this card, I just don't think it belongs here. It is neat to be able to just read ahead to, the read ahead cards are really good with Tom because you can immediately play this after, put it on 3 and get the trigger. But even then, I'm kind of meh on it. I think there's just better choices. For example, Eldest Reborn puts you so far ahead on card advantage that I like it just so much more. Turn after turn, first turn, everyone sacks. Second turn, everyone discards. Third turn, you get a creature. This is just a really, really good card. And I would play Eldest Reborn over Cruelty of Gix for sure. I guess the problem is that it doesn't create a creature token, but at this point, I think this is fine. Battle of Hellvault is too much mana for this effect. It's really cool. I really like the flavor, but I don't think this is what you want. If you wanted Avacyn, just play Avacyn. The first two abilities really it's just not really doing what you want the deck to do, and it takes too long to give you your Avacyn, which I now realize doesn't even have the Avacyn text to protect the rest of your board, so just play Avacyn if you want this ability. Waking the Trolls, this is really good in a land deck, and it's just okay everywhere else. I don't think this belongs here. Once again, too long to get the 4/4, not what you want. World Spell is really, really cute, but doesn't let you get sagas, and therefore I don't like it. It's just the wrong kind of deck for this card, though otherwise really, really cool. And Blasphemous Act, you are a token deck. This is going to be used against you. There'll be no point that your opponents will look at your board and say, I don't want to Blasphemous Act that, so why would you? It would be my argument. You have access to all your colors, just play better board clears. All right, that's generally kind of my ideas here. To go back to the general thing about Tom Bombadil is that there's very different, though there is some variance in the saga decks you can build for him, in the end they'll kind of all blend in together because that's what 5-color decks are. Generally, this is going to be a token version, and to me the token version makes the most sense. It works on the cleanest theme, it's something that all colors of sagas do. You're rarely going to get disappointed in the sense that you'll be like, oh no, my deck isn't doing what it wants. It's going to do what you want. Almost all your sagas do what you want, so you're going to be pretty happy. I hope the suggestions about Tom and keeping Tom on the battlefield were helpful. There's, like I said before, there is a limit of what we can do, but it doesn't mean the deck will always fold to it. You can try to play around it, and even if the deck folds to it, it doesn't mean the deck doesn't have backup options. I think you do have a lot of backup kind of setups. I do, as mentioned before, I really, really like the Historian's Boon here. I really like Onyxia here as another hidden commander that lets you just rebuild all of your sagas and get further advantage from them while creating tokens. Onyxia is really, really close to being a commander I would build. I've had her in my I want to build this slot for a while, but then with the cost of the decks, I've kind of put it aside. But with that in mind, I think the deck is almost complete generally, and just the adjustments of power level would be the next kind of step. However, I think the power level is kind of straightforward. You're playing a lot of the strongest cards in all of the colors, such as Dockside Extortionist, because that's what your deck kind of needs. Sagas aren't super, super strong by themselves, so we got to make it all work together, so we have to play stronger cards here and there. I think that's perfectly normal, and I think it's going to work pretty well. I'm excited to see what you think about the changes. I think the deck's in a good direction, and I want to hear what the adjustments will be for your play group and how they and you will play around this new setup. As always, if you have another draft of this deck or any other deck, you can send it to me in the link that is in the video description below. And Kybor, thank you for supporting the channel again. If anyone wants to be like Kybor and bring your deck up to the front of the list so it's the next deck I look at, there is a link in the video description below. Finally, if you could like, comment, subscribe, do the YouTube thing, I would be very, very grateful. We have made it past 1%, and though it'll be a while until 2%, I am really, really excited to see where the channel goes. All right, good luck.